Hello, ELDR 6433 seminar. How is everybody doing? Dr. Jerry Burkett back with another, podcast. I kind of addressed this last week. I wasn't sure. It's kind of a podcast. Let me break this down. So we just came back from Florida. My niece graduated from high school, so I'm a little behind trying to get caught up here this week. So by the time I get this posted, it's going to feel a little bit behind, but hopefully not too far behind because I'm going to try to get everybody caught up. But we listen to podcasts on our way to when we're driving because it's a long drive. We don't necessarily fly. It's not an anti-flying thing. It's just cheaper to drive. Then again, some of the gas stations I went to would beg to differ, but I digress. We listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and what we've decided is we like the documentary style conversations that happen, that interviews are inserted in between, and you have news clips, and then you have a narrator who's giving you the background. And then my wife doesn't really do podcasts, and to be honest with you, I don't really do or listen to podcasts either, but I recognized at some point that this is a really good medium to connect, and I, not to toot my own horn, I'm going to toot it. I think I'm pretty good on the microphone and pretty engaging. At least I try to be. I wanted to be on the radio when I was a kid, so that's where it actually started. But again, digressing. My wife was asking, what makes your conversation, your lectures, like what I'm doing, what makes it a podcast? And I had to think about it for a minute. I'm not really sure. It's podcast in name only, but the sense is that I'm the only one carrying the show. I'm the only one with the broad topic in mind, and the people that I draw from for this. I was a big fan of Howard Stern. I don't listen to him as much as I used to, but his conversational style and his confidence and the questions that he asks, he's just an outstanding interviewer. I listened to a political commentator by the name of Michael Smerconish. He also carries a show by himself. And then I listened to a sports commentator by the name of Adam Shine. All these individuals carry a show all by themselves. Now, they bring in the occasional phone call, and callers call in and things like that. And yes, Howard has Robin to bounce off of, and the occasional Fred, and they do bits and so on. This is not a radio program. So this is a leadership podcast. So what I have done is, at least for this summer, because the True School Rules podcast is on hiatus, I take a break in the summertime. But then what I do try to do more of is talk about education issues, higher education issues, K-12 issues, news that's happening. I try to warn principals and everybody else teachers entering this profession, what's happening politically, legally. I also bring on guests. I get people reach out to me all the time to want to be on the show, and I interview them and talk about the things that they want to talk about. We've done episodes on bilingual education, school safety. I've got one that I'm saving for later, a colleague of mine who came out of Houston ISD and the turnaround work that happened there. She's about to write a book, or her book's about to come out. So all that being said, what I really hope is that you're getting something out of this conversation versus me lecturing behind a PowerPoint, because that's not what I want. And what I want is this online engagement. You're taking an online course, and I just don't think it's fair if you don't hear from a professor ever. And I hope that's not the case. It might be, but I hope it's not the case. So if anything, I just hope that you're getting something out of these conversations, and at least this medium, this particular way of connecting with you. So with that, we're diving into modules 4 now, and then I'm going to do a separate video of module 5, not to overwhelm you, but just to get caught up, and I'll produce module 5 sometime, probably tomorrow, and get it out next week, because I am doing a T-test training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and that's going to take up a bulk of my time. So again, I'll get behind again if I don't try to get ahead. So with that, we're looking at module 4. Before we dive into module 4, here's some things that I want to talk about. I have graded half of our midterms, about half, and I'm kind of looking here at some notes, and collectively, I think everyone has done a really good job of analyzing your individual scenarios. I think everyone has done a good job of isolating the problem and then looking for the way and the solution to solve it using the frameworks that were provided. I don't think any of you so far have sort of dodged the dilemma and thought about this punitive responses. They've all been very formal, academically focused. The integrity is there. All of you are amazing writers, well organized, extraordinarily coherent. I hope that's coming across in my comments. And so, one thing I would say is that sometimes students get outside of the course a little bit. And maybe because your literature review took you there, that's possible. The assignment wants you to stay inside of the frameworks that we've talked about. Some of you have gone outside of those frameworks. With that, I don't have any strong comments one way or the other. Each of you have done a really good job of staying within your framework. And the ethical framework, I would say on the ethical framework side, explicitly prompt, if you would, utilitarian, virtue, care, rights, common good. Yeah, if you could tie specifically to one of those. I'm nitpicking at this point. But outside of that, I think that everyone sees organizational theory and organizational leadership and perfectly just stick to the frameworks that we've talked about in class. I think that your decisions are pretty firm, very strong, very definitive, high quality within academic controls. Your writing has been good, APA is good. So that's about it. It's all the feedback I have so far, and I still have another half to grade before we get into it. So with that, we're going to get into Module 4, and it's a scorcher. I got to tell you, it's a scorcher, and we're going to talk about communication, culture, and learning, and I'm not going to bore you too much. I'm really going to hit the highlights here on this and just kind of walk you through each one of these. So let's get into it. Okay, first thing out of the box is communication. And I'm going to preface this by saying there are entire degree programs written on communications. They're a communications major. My wife was a communications major, and there are different levels and concepts to communication. This is a leadership class. I am not a communications major. I am not a communications expert at all. So all I can do is just sort of really give you some of the highlights here. But what I can do is give you the rationale to why we're talking about communication. And so if you're looking into the module, we have leadership is grouped into several different categories, and even within those categories, there are still several subcategories. But the strength is that you have direct communicators, which are the let's get to the point people, okay? Then you've got, within that group, you've got the intuitive communicators. These are the ones that want the bottom line, brief summaries, fast decisions. And then you also have analytical communicators. These are the ones that are about logic and data and structured explanations. And so I'm going to stop there before it appears that I'm reading off of the screen, because many of you probably prefer this group. You prefer, and you are probably one of those people who are direct communicators. You want to get to the point. You want to have a true understanding of the bottom line. You don't want any more than what is provided to you. And I'm going to tell you why. Because you are professionals, you are busy, you don't have time to get any further than what the information requires you to have at that specific moment in time. Likely, you were annoyed with the next group, which are, of course, the indirect communicators. These are the ones that are highly relational and contextual. They prefer harmony and nuance and discussion. And maybe you do fall in that category. I'm going to stop here again. When I was a principal years ago in Grand Prairie, one of the things that we were required to do was the true colors assessment, the true colors inventory, which everyone then fell into a green or a gold or a blue or an orange category, okay? You can find it online. If you're not familiar with true colors, go take the assessment. spend some time. You're going to end up with a couple of dominant colors and then some subcolors. All of us fall into all four of them, but some are more dominant than others. And so I was always a green and a gold or a gold and a green. Figure if you want to do it, you can find it. It's not that big of a deal. But when I think about communication, I often think about that when you're dealing with these highly analytical green people who are showing up heads down. They are you don't see them. They come in, they just want to do their work, and you hardly hear from them whatsoever, versus the blue and orange crowd who will not get to the point because they want to know about your weekend and how your family is doing, and they want to connect with you on a relational level. We went through that exercise because we needed to know how to communicate with one another and how to meet each other with our various communication styles. I needed to understand that if you were a blue person, that you needed some of that relational capacity versus someone who is green like me who didn't necessarily need the relational capacity. So I'll let you spend some time on the different communication styles. The definitions are there. You don't need me to read definitions to you, but what you do want from me is the understanding that really what communication comes down to is, as we talked about in Module 1 and we revisited again in Module 2, effective communicators are the ones who handle conflict and understand how to connect with individuals when conflict happens. And here's the fascinating part about this, is that your communication style likely dictates your conflict style, okay? And this is based upon understanding that we have 5 approaches to conflict management. Let's break down each one of those. Now, before I get into these, I have to admit that during COVID, became a big fan of the TV show The Office. And while I'd already seen it and loved the show, but even before COVID, when COVID drove us indoors and we were all watching things on Netflix and Hulu and so on, my wife and I were driven to The Office, and it was one of those shows that we just watched on repeat. And you watch 9 seasons, and then you just start over in season 1. And even now today, just sort of as background noise, I'll turn on The Office and just have it on because it's a great show. There is an episode where Michael Scott, who is the boss, if you haven't seen the show, he gets a little bored and a little interested in conflict management, and he goes through all of the HR files that people have reported on one another, and he's trying to resolve people's conflicts. And so while these aren't quite the same, it reminds me of that. Starting with the first one, and number 1 is competing. And competing basically is it's assertive, it's goal-oriented, it's great for urgent things, but it's going to damage relationships. That's the first one. The second one is accommodating. These are the ones that prioritize relationships over the issue itself, and this is where you use harmony to create a baseline to resolve the conflict, more than actually winning or gaining the goal that's needed. So accommodating, you can imagine what that looks like for someone resolving conflict. Then you have the avoidance folks. These are the ones that delay, they sidestep. This is useful if emotions are running high, because you can always just, hey, once the temperature is lowered a little bit, we can revisit and we can address the conflict as necessary. If people are yelling at each other, you probably need to let things settle down a little bit before you get into the nitty-gritty of what caused the problem. This is what police officers do. I wouldn't call it avoidance necessarily, but that's what it's called in the research. Compromising. This is obviously the middle ground. This is where everyone gives up something in order to reach, an efficient method of a resolution. And then the last one, of course, is collaborating. And this is where everyone comes together and finds a win-win solution. It takes a lot of time to do this, but it builds immense trust and long-term alignment for your organization. Now, of course, I'm going to say this, and you probably aren't shocked by this, that great leaders are good at all of these. Great leaders are the ones that can adapt to various communication styles, understand how they work with the people that you're working with, and that when conflict does occur, you utilize the correct tool for the job that needs to be done. So all of these styles are great. No one style is preferred over another one. But again, As I prefaced at the beginning, I am not a communications expert, and this is just one little tiny element of the overall system that we call leadership. And leaders need to have an understanding of what communication is, what it looks like, and how to do it effectively, and that's why we're discussing it here. So, next big thing, let's talk about some legal and cultural dimensions of leadership, which is talking about culture and policy and how that works together. So, culture. When I talk to my principal candidates, I do a lecture on culture. And because culture and climate is a huge part of obviously building a cohesive and coherent school environment. Well, organizational culture is a part of that too. And so people don't get confused. Culture basically is how we do things around here. Very simply put. My analogy that I used to do is Christmas. I used to talk about culture as Christmas. And I used to ask students, and I'll just ask you to think about this in your own context. If you were someone who celebrates Christmas, of course, and that's the hard part about me doing this cultural analogy, but just bear with me. If it's not Christmas, then whatever major holiday you can think of. But Christmas, and what I do is that I go, all right, do you put up a tree? Do you eat? When do you celebrate? Do you give out presents? How do you celebrate? How do you decorate your tree? Do you go to church services? Ask all of those general questions. And when I'm in a room of people doing that lecture, of course, everyone's giving different answers. Yes, we have a meal, but we have turkey, we have ham, we have tamales, we have wings. I mean, just various things. Gumbo came up one day. Then I asked how you decorate your tree. Some people put up more than one tree. Some people have trees that are themed. Some people put the same ornaments on their tree. Some people celebrate by giving their presents out on Christmas Eve. Some people do it on Christmas Day. Some people do the adults on one day and the children on another. Some people go to Mass the day before. Some people go to Christmas services the day of, and so on and so on and so on. That's culture. That is all Christmas culture. And then I ask everyone, are you doing Christmas wrong? Of course you're not doing Christmas wrong. Everyone's doing Christmas their own way. It's their culture, their family. And what's great about culture in this organizational context is that if someone gets married, if someone is new coming into the family, guess what you have to do? You have to introduce that person to your culture. You're not necessarily going to change the way you've been doing Christmas just because you've got a new person coming in. You might try to be more accommodating. Let's say they don't eat meat when you have ham. Okay, so you're going to add another side dish. But doesn't mean you're going to stop serving ham, right? Maybe they don't go to church, but you might invite them to church if they're comfortable with that. Or if they choose not to go, they don't go. So you get my point. Whenever we have culture, okay, it's a leader's responsibility to evaluate that culture on a regular basis, make sure that it's coherent, make sure that everyone understands their role in it, and then as culture evolves and new people come in and people leave, that the culture evolves with it. So there are 4 different types of culture. Let's break down each one. The first one is clan culture, and clan culture is very close to what I just described. Relationship oriented, very collaborative, very supportive, and it starts with a leader, with a lone person who is sort of the one that dictates how things are to be. If you think about that in your own family, it's probably going to be a mom or a dad or a grandmother, or someone who's like, we've always done it this way, and it kind of feeds down into your children. That organizations work much the same way. If you go into an organization, you have a clan culture, it's highly participative. Everyone participates, everyone comes together, and the decision making is largely done as a group. So that's why it's clan culture. The next one is adhocracy culture. This one is a very, very flexible organization. Things change day by the minute. It is very much led by the leader. What's interesting about adhocracy culture is that it's sort of driven by experimentation. So what you do one week, you may not do the next week, and you're just sort of evolving and developing and building a culture each and every week. This is really helpful for those organizations that sort of work seasonally or have a lot of changeover or have a very healthy mix of different people coming in and out of the organization on a regular basis. The next one is hierarchical culture, and this one is built on organizations that have been around a long time. They have policies, they have procedures, they have a very formalized structure in place, and it's not necessarily like we've been doing it this way for 100 years and we don't change. Sometimes we've been doing it this way for 100 years because it is the most efficient and effective way to get this particular work done. And so it is rooted in very strong, established channels, leaders, directors, people filtering all the way down from the top. Very easy to see what a hierarchical culture looks like. And the last one is market culture, and this is basically just business 101. Everything is driven by results. It's very competitive, measurable outcomes, strategic advantages, and you can kind of see a culture that is built upon profit and making sure that things get done in a very efficient and an accountable way. So I don't know that the organizations that we're necessarily working in are like that unless you're just like a school district that is just highly competitive with student accountability and test scores. But I don't think that's a great culture anyway. So when I think of market culture, I think of something like Amazon. That's generally what I think of. All right, so the important discussion here about culture is that when you're actually in a leadership role, and I think some of you have seen this from your scenarios, is that what happens is when culture and policy collide. So what happens when, let's say you're in a clan culture and you're very close-knit and you're like a family and you all love each other and you go hang out and you do happy hours together and that kind of thing, and you've got that very collegial, supportive, loving culture, and then somebody screws up and you've got to write them up. Okay? That's where it gets confusing, and that's where you as a leader have to understand not only your communication style, but your conflict style, and how are you going to address this without damaging relationships, okay? Because when you damage relationships, that's going to lower productivity, and when productivity is lowered, then what do you think that does to the culture? You can see how it becomes very, very cyclical at that point. So it's one of those things that maybe you have such a relationship with this person that you just want to take them to Starbucks and sit down and talk it out. Like, we've got to figure out what happened here so that it doesn't happen again, and we'll do it over a latte. But they are an employee. They work for you. You're the leader. You're the boss. You're the person that has to actually document this conversation and do either a verbal or a written warning or write-up or whatever HR commands. So it's one of those situations that what kind of culture you've built for your organization can dictate what happens next when there is a true conflict and when someone does mess up. So ethical leadership truly requires you to kind of understand how both of these things fit together. The culture of your organization, what you have built, how people are interacting with one another within that organization, and then how to address problems when they occur. That's where the conflict management comes in. So as you start to develop yourself into a leadership role, I think it's very important that you understand not only the organization as a whole, what kind of organization am I leading here, but how do people fit within the culture that I have built? And then how do I address problems and conflicts when they arise? That's really what kind of the point of Module 4 is when you think about it. Now, as we wrap up today, a couple of things I want you to do is that the next big thing on here is Peter Senge's 5 disciplines. I don't want to read it to you. Go in, spend some time reading about each of the 5: personal mastery, mental model, shared vision, team learning, and systems thinking. You can go in and read it. It doesn't require a whole lot of lecture and explanation from my part, so spend some time on that. But most important for Module 4, if you haven't done it yet, and last time I checked, only a few of you had, I want to make sure that you go into Canvas and take the 5-minute communication style quiz that's linked inside of Canvas. Go in there, take that quiz, take some time, again, 5 minutes to do this, so that you get a sense of what your communication style is and so that you can know how it would apply here in these contexts. All right, that's it for this week. Quick and easy, talking about culture, talking about conflict, talking about how the policies and legal concepts apply to those things. And that's Module 4. Not a lot to Module 4, but then we get into Module 5. And what we want to talk about here is developing a personal leadership philosophy. In this, I won't spend a whole lot of time on. I will address it in a video so that you do have it. But personal leadership philosophy, that's now that you kind of have a sense of each of the leadership philosophies, this is where you really get a chance to sit down and think about who you are as a leader. I asked my principal candidates to do this. I actually asked them to write an autoethnography, and you can look that up later. But it's a chance to do some real good self-reflection, because as I said before, what makes you think you should be a leader? Right? Like, who asked you to be a leader? Are you a leader because of your title or your degree or because of your experience? Sure, those things feed into it. But then when you actually sit in the leadership role, what is it about you makes you think you can be a leader? And how are you going to lead me? How are you going to get people to actually listen and follow you with your vision and your culture and the things that you want for the organization? It's a really good exercise on developing the kind of person that you want to be as a leader. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, because I've done some research on it, the reality is that a lot of your background and who you are up to this point is going to lend to the kind of leader that you want to be. So it's okay for you to completely draw upon your own experiences growing up, people you've worked for, mentors that you've had, experiences, both good and bad, that have led you up to this point to say, hey, I want a doctorate in leadership. Great. How did you get to this point? That's essentially what your leadership philosophy would be. If I were writing it, I would spend a lot of time about growing up with a single mom in East Waco in a poor side of town, and how kids like me didn't go to Baylor. I went to Baylor, and how growing up in that environment drove me to be an accomplished person. I wasn't the kind of person that you can tell me what I can and can't do, because if you tell me I can't do something, I'm probably going to prove to you that I can. I spent a lot of my life being that person that proves that I can do something even if you think that I can't. So that would kind of be mine, and I'd get into some more nuances, and I've developed a leadership style over the years that I think is pretty good. But I want to hear from yours. So think about that as you're working into Module 5. With that, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and I will see you soon.